3 months pregnant, standing outside a crime lord's office, hearing the man you love say children are liabilities he'll never want. That's the moment Lila Hart's world shattered, when invisibility became her only weapon and disappearing became her only choice. But you can't hide from a man who owns the city. You can't run from someone who sees you as his. And you definitely can't keep secrets from Victor Kane. This is the story of a woman who vanished in the empire that came looking. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Gents, the mahogany door felt cold against Lila Hart's fingertips. She stood in the dim hallway outside Victor Kane's office, one hand pressed to the carved wood, the other instinctively covering her still flat stomach. The mansion around her breathed with the quiet hum of late evening, distant footsteps on marble floors, the muffled conversation of security personnel rotating shifts, the soft click of expensive locks engaging throughout the sprawling estate. 3 months. That's how long she'd been carrying this secret. 3 months of nausea hidden behind closed bathroom doors, of exhaustion disguised as dedication to her work, of terror wrapped in the careful packaging of professional distance. And now, standing here, she was about to learn if any of it mattered. Victor's voice carried through the crack in the door, deep, measured, the kind of voice that made boardrooms fall silent and rivals reconsider their strategies. But tonight it carried something else, something that made Lila's blood run cold. Laughter. "You think I'm being unreasonable?" Victor said, his tone almost amused. "Marcus, I've built this organization on calculated risk. Every decision, every move, measured against potential gain and potential loss." "I understand that, boss." The second voice belonged to Marcus Reeves, Victor's longtime attorney and advisor. "I'm just saying, family can be, a liability." Victor's interruption was sharp, final. "Children, especially. They're targets, Marcus. Walking vulnerabilities. Leverage for enemies. Complications that turn strategy into emotional chaos." Lila's hand trembled against the door. "So when people ask," Victor continued, his chair creaking as he presumably leaned back, "when they hint or suggest or outright question why a man in my position hasn't started a family, the answer is simple. I never wanted children. I never will." The silence that followed was deafening. Lila stepped back from the door, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she was certain everyone in the mansion could hear it. Her other hand moved to join the first, both palms now pressed flat against her abdomen, as if she could somehow shield the tiny life inside her from the words she'd just heard. "I never wanted children. I never will." She'd known it was complicated, known that Victor Kane, feared crime lord, untouchable power in New York's underworld, wouldn't exactly welcome an unplanned pregnancy with open arms. But she'd hoped. She'd let herself imagine that maybe, just maybe, when he knew, when it was real and tangible and theirs. "Lila?" She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Rafe Morrison stood at the end of the hallway, Victor's head of security and the closest thing to a shadow the crime boss had. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that missed nothing, Rafe tilted his head slightly, studying her with that unsettling focus he was known for. "You need something?" he asked, his voice neutral but his gaze sharp. Lila forced herself to breathe, to smooth her expression into the careful blankness she'd perfected over 2 years of working in this house. Invisibility wasn't just about being quiet or staying out of the way. It was about becoming part of the background, as unremarkable as the wallpaper, as forgettable as yesterday's weather. "Mr. Kane asked for fresh coffee an hour ago," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos screaming through her mind. "I was just checking if he still wanted it." A lie. A complete lie. But delivered with the same quiet professionalism that had kept her employed and alive in Victor Kane's world. Rafe's eyes narrowed fractionally, but he nodded. "He's in a meeting. I'll let him know you came by." "Thank you." She turned and walked away, forcing herself to maintain an even pace, to keep her hands relaxed at her sides, to project nothing but the efficient calm of a woman who knew her place and kept to it. She made it to the service stairwell before her legs gave out. Lila sank onto the bottom step, her whole body shaking. The stairwell was one of the few places in the mansion where cameras didn't reach, a blind spot she'd discovered months ago, back when Victor had first started noticing her in ways that went beyond her professional capacity. "I never wanted children. I never will." The words echoed in her mind, each repetition driving home the impossible reality of her situation. She was 3 months pregnant with Victor Kane's child, and he could never, ever know. Digit. Lila had come to the Kane mansion 2 years ago, desperate and running from a past that had left her broke, alone, and convinced she'd never trust another person again. The job posting had been simple: live-in housekeeper for a private residence, room and board included, references required, discretion essential. She'd assumed it was some wealthy family's estate, maybe old money, the kind of people who wanted their staff invisible and their privacy absolute. She'd been half right. Victor Kane's mansion sat in the heart of Manhattan's Upper East Side, a sprawling architectural masterpiece that managed to be both ostentatious and somehow invisible, blending into the neighborhood's landscape of wealth and power so seamlessly that most people walked past it without a second glance. The iron gates, the security checkpoints, the guards who dressed like investment brokers, it had all seemed excessive but not alarming. Not until her third day, when she'd accidentally walked in on a meeting in the south drawing room and seen 3 men kneeling on the Persian rug, while Victor sat in a wingback chair, utterly calm, explaining why their recent shipment discrepancies were unacceptable and personally disappointing. She'd backed out immediately, heart racing. But Victor had noticed her. "You," he'd said, his voice carrying across the room. "Come here." She'd frozen, certain she was about to become another discrepancy that needed addressing. But when she'd forced herself to step forward, Victor had simply looked at her, really looked at her, in a way that made her feel seen for the first time in years, and asked, "What's your name?" "Lila Hart, sir." "How long have you worked here, Lila?" "3 days, sir." He'd studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "What you saw here doesn't leave this room, understood?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Go about your work." She'd left quickly, but not before catching the slight smile that had tugged at the corner of his mouth. Later, Rafe had pulled her aside and explained the situation in terms that were crystal clear. Victor Kane ran an organization that operated outside legal boundaries. The people who worked in this house knew that. They kept their mouths shut, did their jobs, and in return, they were paid well and protected fiercely. Betray that trust, and the consequences would be severe. Lila had understood. More importantly, she'd realized she didn't care. Her old life had been legal and legitimate and had destroyed her anyway. If working for a crime lord meant stability, safety, and a place where she could finally breathe, then so be it. She'd been invisible for 6 months, professional, efficient, utterly unremarkable. And then Victor had started talking to her. It began with small things, questions about her day, comments about the book she left on the kitchen counter during her breaks, requests for her opinion on everything from coffee preferences to the arrangement of furniture in the rarely used library. She'd responded carefully, maintaining appropriate distance, never forgetting who and what he was. But something had shifted between them, some unspoken recognition, as if they'd both spent so long being something other than themselves that finding someone who didn't require the performance was intoxicating. 3 months ago, that shift had become something else entirely. She'd been working late, organizing Victor's private study, when he'd returned from a meeting, earlier than expected, and clearly frustrated. He'd poured himself a drink, stood by the window overlooking the city, and for 10 minutes, he'd simply talked. About pressure and expectations and the exhausting weight of being the person everyone looked to for answers. She'd listened, responded when appropriate, offered nothing but presence and understanding. When he'd kissed her, it had felt inevitable, like gravity, like something that had been building for months and had finally reached critical mass. The affair, if that's what it was, had been conducted with absolute discretion. Stolen moments in his study after the rest of the household had retired. Quiet conversations that stretched into early morning hours. A connection that felt both impossibly fragile and unbreakably strong. He'd never made promises, never pretended this was something it wasn't. But there had been care in the way he touched her, genuine interest in the way he listened, and something that looked dangerously close to affection in the way he watched her move through his world. She'd been stupid enough to think it might mean something. "I never wanted children. I never will." Lila pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes, willing herself not to cry. Not here. Not where someone might see. She'd suspected the pregnancy 2 weeks ago, confirmed it with a test from a pharmacy 3 subway stops away from the mansion, far enough that no one would recognize her, close enough that the trip wouldn't be noted as unusual. The positive result had been both shocking and somehow expected, as if some part of her had known before her body had even begun to change. She'd spent those 2 weeks in a fog of indecision. Tell him? Don't tell him? Hope for the best? Prepare for the worst? Now she had her answer. Victor Kane didn't want children. He saw them as liabilities, vulnerabilities, complications. And Lila Hart was about to become the biggest complication of his life. She made her decision on the service stairs, in the darkness, with her hand still pressed protectively over her stomach. She would leave, disappear, become invisible in a way that even Victor Kane's extensive resources couldn't penetrate. The plan formed with surprising clarity, probably because she'd been unconsciously preparing for something like this since the moment she'd seen those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. She had savings, not much, but enough. She had contacts, minimal but crucial. And she had the one thing that had kept her alive through the worst period of her life, the ability to vanish. She just had to be smart about it, patient, careful, starting now. Lila stood, smoothed her hands over her simple black dress, the uniform of household staff, and climbed the stairs back to the main floor. She would return to her duties, act normal, be invisible, and she would start saying goodbye to a life she'd never really believed she could keep anyway. The next 3 days were a masterclass in deception. Lila moved through the mansion with her usual quiet efficiency, cleaning rooms that were already pristine, organizing spaces that needed no organization, maintaining the seamless operation of Victor Kane's household. But beneath the surface, she was planning, calculating, preparing. She started with her room, a small but comfortable suite on the 3rd floor, tucked away in what had once been servants' quarters. She began sorting her possessions into 3 categories: essential, sentimental, and expendable. Essential items went into a small duffel bag hidden at the back of her closet, clothes that could be layered and mixed, toiletries. The envelope of cash she'd been slowly accumulating over 2 years, $3,000 in various denominations, never deposited in a bank, never tracked. Her passport, a prepaid cell phone she'd purchased months ago and never activated. Sentimental items were harder. The leather journal filled with her mother's recipes, the silver bracelet her grandmother had given her before she died, the photograph of her younger sister, taken before everything fell apart. These would have to stay. Sentiment was a luxury she couldn't afford. Sentiment left trails, created patterns, made people predictable. The expendable category was everything else. The books she'd collected, the small wardrobe of nicer clothes Victor had insisted she accept, the few personal touches that had made this room feel like home. All of it would remain, creating the illusion that she'd left in a hurry but planned to return. That she'd had an emergency, family crisis, personal matter, something urgent but temporary. The only exception was her mother's necklace. A simple gold chain with a small locket, nothing valuable but everything precious. She couldn't leave it. Wouldn't. On the 2nd day of her preparations, Victor found her in the library. She'd been dusting the upper shelves, a task she'd volunteered for specifically because it kept her hands busy and her face hidden, when she heard his footsteps on the hardwood floor. Lila. Her heart stuttered, but she kept her movement steady, carefully wiping down a leather-bound first edition before turning to face him. Victor stood in the doorway, dressed in the casual elegance he favored when working from home. Dark slacks, a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. At 42, he was devastatingly handsome in a way that had nothing to do with conventional attractiveness and everything to do with presence. Power. The absolute certainty that he was the most dangerous person in any room he entered. "Mr. Kane," she said, her voice professionally neutral. "Can I help you with something?" His eyes narrowed slightly. She'd been calling him Victor in private for months. The return to formality would register. "Are you avoiding me?" he asked, moving into the library with that predatory grace that made her pulse quicken for entirely different reasons than fear. "No, sir. I've been busy." "Too busy to eat dinner with me last night? Too busy to answer when I knocked on your door?" She had been in her room, had heard his knock, the quiet call of her name, had pressed herself against the far wall and held her breath until she heard him walk away. I wasn't feeling well, she said. Not entirely a lie. Morning sickness had evolved into all-day nausea that she was barely managing to hide. I went to bed early. Victor studied her for a long moment, and she forced herself to meet his gaze, to project nothing but mild concern and professional distance. Are you still unwell? He asked, and something in his voice, genuine worry, made her chest ache. I'm fine, just tired. He took another step closer, and she had to fight the urge to retreat. At 6'3", Victor had a way of filling space, of making her hyper-aware of his proximity. Usually, she welcomed it. Now, it felt suffocating. Lila, he said quietly, if something's wrong, nothing's wrong, Mr. Kane. I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly fine. Was there something you needed? The formal tone, the careful distance, it was all wrong, and they both knew it. Victor's expression shuddered, the warmth in his eyes cooling to something more guarded. I have a meeting in Chicago, he said, his voice matching her formality. I'll be gone for 3 days, possibly 4. Make sure the house is ready for my return. Of course, sir. He looked at her for another moment, as if trying to decode what had changed, what had shifted between them. Then he nodded curtly and left the library without another word. Lila waited until his footsteps faded before she allowed herself to breathe. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to set down the dusting cloth. 3 days, possibly 4. It was perfect. More time than she'd hoped for. She just had to make it until he left. Victor's convoy departed at 6 a.m. on the 3rd day. Lila watched from her window as 3 black SUVs pulled away from the mansion, carrying Victor, Rafe, Marcus, and a security detail that could overthrow a small country. She waited until the vehicles disappeared from view. Then she waited another 30 minutes, forcing herself to maintain her routine, to show no signs of the plan rapidly unfolding in her mind. At 7 a.m., she went downstairs for breakfast with the other household staff, a rotating cast of people who, like her, knew exactly who they worked for and had made peace with it. She ate mechanically, contributed to the casual conversation, gave no indication that this was the last morning she would spend in this house. At 8 a.m., she began her usual cleaning rotation, starting with the second-floor guest suites. She worked efficiently, thoroughly, leaving no detail overlooked. At 10 a.m., and during the shift change when the daytime security team relieved the overnight crew, a chaotic 15-minute window when everyone was focused on briefings and handoffs, Lila slipped down the service stairs, through the kitchen, and out the delivery entrance. She was wearing her street clothes, jeans, a loose sweater that disguised her barely visible pregnancy, a jacket, and a baseball cap. The duffel bag was light on her shoulder, containing everything essential and nothing memorable. The delivery entrance opened onto a narrow alley that connected to a side street. She'd mapped this route weeks ago, back when she'd first started considering the possibility that she might need to leave quickly and quietly. She walked 4 blocks before allowing herself to glance back. The mansion was invisible from here, hidden behind trees and neighboring buildings. She kept walking. The subway station was crowded with morning commuters, a sea of faces that barely registered her presence. Lila purchased a Metro card with cash, rode the train to Grand Central, and switched to another line heading toward Brooklyn. She'd called Maya 2 days ago, her only friend from before, a woman who'd helped her pick up the pieces after her old life had imploded. Maya hadn't asked questions, hadn't pressed for details. She'd just given Lila an address and told her to be careful. The apartment was in a quiet Brooklyn neighborhood, the kind of place where people minded their own business and newcomers were common enough to be unremarkable. Maya had arranged a short-term lease under a name that wasn't Lila's, paid in cash, no questions asked. It was small, a studio with barely enough room for a bed, a kitchenette, and a tiny bathroom. But it was clean, private, and most importantly, it was somewhere Victor Kane would never think to look. Lila set her duffel bag on the floor, locked the door behind her, and finally allowed herself to collapse onto the bed. She'd done it. She'd gotten out. Now she just had to stay gone. The first week was the hardest. Every sound in the hallway made her freeze. Every knock on a neighbor's door sent her heart racing. Every siren in the distance made her imagine Victor's security team closing in. But no one came. No black SUVs appeared on the street. No men in expensive suits knocked on her door demanding answers. She started to believe she might actually pull this off. Maya visited on the third day, bringing groceries and a prepaid laptop. You look like hell, Maya said, setting bags on the small counter. Lila managed a weak smile. Thanks. You always know what to say. I'm serious, Lila. Are you eating? Sleeping? When I can. Maya studied her with the same sharp assessment she'd used 2 years ago when Lila had shown up on her doorstep with nothing but a backpack and a desperate plea for help. Then, as now, she'd asked no questions. She'd just helped. Is this about a guy? Maya asked finally. It's complicated. It's always complicated. Is he dangerous? Lila thought about Victor, about the way he commanded rooms, orchestrated operations, made people disappear with a phone call. Then she thought about the way he'd touched her face in the darkness of his study, the quiet vulnerability in his voice when he'd talked about the weight of his world, the genuine care in his eyes when he'd asked if she was unwell. Yes, she said, he's dangerous. But not to you. It wasn't a question. Maya had always been unnervingly perceptive. It doesn't matter, Lila said. I can't go back. Maya nodded slowly, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small white box. Then you're going to need this. Inside the box was a new phone, already activated with a number Maya had set up under her own account. Untraceable to Lila. Invisible. Use it sparingly, Maya said. And if you need anything, you call me. Understand? Lila's throat tightened. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just stay safe. After Maya left, Lila sat on the bed holding the phone, staring at the blank screen. She could call Victor, right now. Tell him everything. Ask him to what? Accept a child he'd explicitly stated he never wanted? Upend his carefully controlled world for a complication he'd spent his entire adult life avoiding? She turned the phone off and hid it in the drawer of the bedside table. Some decisions, once made, couldn't be unmade. By the second week, Lila had established a routine. She found a part-time job at a small neighborhood cafe. Nothing fancy, just enough to supplement her savings and create a paper trail that suggested normalcy. She registered at a local clinic under her real name, figuring that hiding her identity completely would be more suspicious than simply being one of millions of pregnant women in New York City. The clinic was clean, professional, and blessedly discreet. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and efficient hands, confirmed what Lila already knew. 14 weeks pregnant, everything progressing normally. Next appointment in 4 weeks. Do you have support? The doctor asked, her gaze direct but not unkind. Family? The father? I have a friend, Lila said. I'll be fine. The doctor handed her a stack of pamphlets about prenatal care, nutrition, and resources for single mothers. Lila took them with a smile that felt like it might crack her face. She was really doing this, having a baby, alone. The reality of it hit her in waves, sometimes terrifying, sometimes exhilarating, always overwhelming. She would lie awake at night, one hand on her still small belly, and try to imagine a future where this made sense, where she could be a mother, build a life, raise a child without Victor Kane's shadow hanging over everything. Some nights, she could almost see it. Other nights, she just cried. On the 17th day, her phone rang. Not the new phone Maya had given her, her old phone, the one she'd turned off and buried at the bottom of her duffel bag, the one she'd sworn she wouldn't turn on again. Except she had turned it on. Just once. Just to see if... The number on the screen was blocked, but she knew who it was. Knew with absolute certainty. Her hand shook as she stared at the ringing phone. Answer it, one part of her screamed. Hear his voice. End this unbearable silence. Don't answer, the rational part countered. Every contact is a risk. Every connection is a thread he can follow. The phone stopped ringing, went silent. Lila exhaled shakily and was about to turn it off again when a text message came through. I know you're scared. I know you're hiding. But please, Lila, let me explain. Let me help. Just tell me you're safe. Her vision blurred with tears. He didn't know. He couldn't know about the pregnancy. This was just about her disappearance, about the fact that she'd left without a word, without explanation. She should delete the message, turn off the phone, maintain the distance. Instead, she typed a single word, safe. She sent it before she could change her mind, then immediately powered down the phone and shoved it back into the duffel bag. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But the thought of Victor worrying, imagining the worst, searching for her in desperation, she couldn't let him suffer like that. Not completely, even if it meant risking everything. Gadincheb. 3 weeks passed. Lila's life settled into a strange kind of limbo, part hiding, part existing, part waiting for the other shoe to drop. She worked at the cafe, attended her clinic appointments, read books about pregnancy and childbirth that Maya bought for her. She was invisible again, but differently this time. Not because she was trying to fade into the background of someone else's world, but because she was building her own world, small, quiet, hers. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, she felt it. The sensation of being watched. It was subtle at first, a prickling awareness on the back of her neck as she walked home from the cafe. The same man standing on the corner 2 days in a row. A car parked across the street that seemed to appear wherever she went. She told herself she was being paranoid, that stress and hormones were making her see patterns that didn't exist. But Lila had spent 2 years in Victor Kane's world. She knew what surveillance looked like. Someone was watching her. She varied her routes home, took random detours, used every trick she'd learned about avoiding detection. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger each day. On Saturday morning, she opened her apartment door to find a single white envelope on the floor outside. Her name was written on it in handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside was a note. He knows. Leave now. No signature. No explanation. Lila's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the paper. She grabbed her phone, the new one, and called Maya. I need to leave, she said as soon as Maya answered. Today. Now. What happened? Someone knows where I am. I have to go. Where? I don't know. Somewhere far. Somewhere he won't. Lila. Maya's voice was calm, grounding. Breathe. Come to my place. We'll figure this out. Lila nodded, even though Maya couldn't see her. Okay, I'm coming. She hung up and started throwing things into her duffel bag. Clothes, toiletries, the few possessions she'd allowed herself to accumulate. She was halfway through packing when someone knocked on her door. Not a gentle knock, a firm, authoritative knock that made every instinct scream danger. Lila Hart opened the door. The voice was familiar, unmistakable. Rafe Morrison. Her heart stopped. For one endless moment, she stood frozen in the middle of her tiny apartment, surrounded by the evidence of her failed escape, her hand instinctively covering her stomach. I know you're in there, Rafe called through the door. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just here to talk. A lie. It had to be a lie. Go away, she called back, hating how her voice shook. Can't do that. Boss wants to see you. I don't work for him anymore. This isn't about work, Leela, and we both know it. She stared at the door, her mind racing through options and finding them all equally impossible. Run? There was no other exit. Fight? Rafe could break down this door without breaking a sweat. Refuse? That would just delay the inevitable. If I open this door, she said slowly, will you promise not to force me to go anywhere? Silence. Then, you have my word. It wasn't much, but coming from Rafe Morrison, it was something. Lila took a deep breath, walked to the door, and opened it. Rafe stood in the hallway dressed in his usual dark suit, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp. He looked her over, a quick assessing glance that took in her pale face, her protective stance, the visible anxiety she couldn't quite hide. You look different, he said. People change. Yeah, they do. He paused, then gestured toward the apartment's interior. Can I come in? Every instinct screamed no, but she stepped aside anyway, because this conversation was happening whether she wanted it to or not. Rafe entered, his gaze sweeping the small space with professional efficiency. He saw the duffel bag on the bed, the half-packed belongings, the evidence of imminent flight. Running again? He asked. I received a warning. From who? I don't know. Someone left a note saying Victor knows where I am. Rafe's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Victor's known where you are for 2 weeks. The words hit like a physical blow. What? I found you 11 days ago, reported your location to him that same day. He told me to watch, verify you were safe, but not to approach unless necessary. Lila's legs felt weak. She sat down on the edge of the bed, her mind reeling. He's known for 2 weeks and didn't. He wanted to give you space, time, whatever it was you needed. Rafe's voice was matter of fact, but there was something underneath it. Disapproval, maybe. Or respect. But then he saw the clinic footage. The room tilted. What clinic footage? He's been reviewing security feeds from your neighborhood, trying to understand why you left, what you were running from. Yesterday, he saw you entering an OBGYN clinic. Rafe's gaze dropped to her stomach, then back to her face. He put it together pretty quick after that. Lila couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Victor knew. He'd known where she was, had been watching her, and now he knew about the baby. What did he say? She whispered. He didn't. Just told me to find you, bring you to him, said he needed to talk to you in person. And if I refuse? Rafe considered this. He won't force you. That's not what this is about. But Lila? He paused, choosing his words carefully. I've worked for Victor Kane for 8 years. I've seen him handle crises, betrayals, threats to his empire. I've never seen him like this. Like what? Scared. The word hung between them, impossible and somehow utterly believable. He's in Chicago, Rafe continued, waiting. He flew out this morning the second he confirmed his suspicions. He wants to talk to you, but he wants it to be your choice. So I'm asking, will you come? Lila looked down at her hands, folded protectively over her stomach. She thought about the note. He knows. Leave now. And wondered who had sent it and why. She thought about Victor's voice through his office door. I never wanted children. I never will. She thought about his text message. Let me explain. Let me help. And she thought about the tiny life growing inside her, the child who deserved better than a mother running forever, better than a father who didn't know they existed. If I go to Chicago, she said slowly, and I don't like what he has to say, you'll bring me back here? Let me leave. You have my word. Lila looked up at Rafe Morrison, at the stone-faced head of security, who just made a promise he might not be authorized to keep and made a decision that felt both like surrender and like the bravest thing she'd ever done. Okay, she said. I'll go. The private jet was nothing like Lila had imagined. She'd expected ostentation, leather and gold, the kind of aggressive luxury that screamed power and money. Instead, the interior was understated elegance, cream-colored seats, dark wood accents, and windows that offered an unobstructed view of the clouds they were racing through. Rafe sat across from her, his attention divided between his phone and the occasional glance in her direction. He hadn't said much since they'd left her apartment, just guided her through a series of unmarked doors and private corridors until they'd arrived at a small airfield outside the city. We'll be landing in about an hour, he said now, pocketing his phone. There's food in the galley if you're hungry. Water, juice, whatever you need. Lila's stomach churned at the mention of food, but she nodded. Thank you. You should eat something, Rafe added, his tone gentler than she'd ever heard it. For the baby. The words hit her with unexpected force. The baby. Her hand moved automatically to her stomach, a gesture that was becoming second nature. Does everyone know? She asked quietly. Just me and Victor. He hasn't told anyone else. Won't, unless you want him to. That surprised her. Victor Kane, who controlled information like a weapon, keeping a secret this significant to himself. Why? She asked. Rafe considered the question. You'd have to ask him. But if I had to guess, he's protecting you, both of you. From what? From everything. His world isn't kind to vulnerabilities, Lila. You know that. A pregnant woman, a child, those are the kind of targets that keep men like him awake at night. Lila looked out the window at the endless expanse of sky. He said children were liabilities, that he never wanted them. Yeah, I heard about that conversation. Rafe's expression darkened slightly. You were listening at the door. I didn't mean to. She stopped, realizing how futile the explanation sounded. Marcus was pushing him about succession planning, Rafe said. About what happens to the organization if something happens to Victor. It's a conversation they've had a dozen times, and Victor's answer is always the same. No family, no heirs, no personal attachments that can be exploited. So he meant it. He meant it in that context, in the abstract, when it was theoretical. Rafe leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. But you're not theoretical anymore, Lila. Neither is that baby. And Victor Kane doesn't do well with situations he can't control or predict. So what does he want from me? Like I said, you'll have to ask him. The jet began its descent shortly after, and Lila's anxiety ratcheted up with every foot of altitude they lost. By the time they landed at a private airstrip outside Chicago, her hands were shaking again. A car was waiting on the tarmac, sleek, black, bulletproof, if she had to guess. Rafe opened the door for her and she slid into the back seat, her heart hammering. The drive took 20 minutes, winding through Chicago's downtown core before pulling up to a high-rise hotel that probably cost more per night than she used to make in a month. Rafe escorted her through a private entrance, into an elevator that required a key card, and up to the penthouse level. "He's in the suite at the end of the hall," Rafe said when the elevator doors opened. "I'll wait here." Lila stared down the long corridor, every instinct screaming at her to turn around, get back in the elevator, run. But she'd come this far, and running hadn't solved anything the first time. She walked down the hall on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. The door to the suite was already open, as if he'd been waiting, watching for her arrival. Victor stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to the door, his silhouette stark against the Chicago skyline. He was still dressed in the clothes he must have traveled in, dark slacks, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his jacket discarded somewhere. Even from behind, he radiated tension. "Lila." Her name, spoken in that deep voice, nearly undid her. She stepped into the suite and the door closed softly behind her. Rafe's doing, giving them privacy. Victor turned around, and the sight of him hit her like a physical blow. He looked exhausted. Lines of strain marked his face, shadows beneath his eyes, and something in his expression that looked dangerously close to desperation. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice so profound it made her chest ache. "Rafe didn't give me much choice. He had explicit instructions not to force you. If you're here, it's because you chose to be." Lila wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the suite's comfortable temperature. "You've been watching me. For weeks. I've been making sure you were safe. There's a difference." "Is there?" Victor's jaw tightened. "I didn't approach you, didn't interfere, didn't try to drag you back. I gave you space, Lila, even when every instinct I have was screaming at me to—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration she'd rarely seen from him. "I respected your choice to leave. Until you found out about the baby." The words hung between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Victor's gaze dropped to her stomach, and something flickered across his face. Wonder, fear, something she couldn't quite name. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. "Because I heard you," Lila said, and her voice cracked despite her best efforts. "That night, outside your office, I heard you tell Marcus that you never wanted children, that they were liabilities, complications." Victor's expression shuddered. "You were listening." "I didn't mean to, but I heard enough." He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on some point past her shoulder. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "That conversation wasn't about you, wasn't about us. It was about children, about how you saw them as weaknesses to be avoided. What was I supposed to think, Victor? That you'd make an exception for mine? Ours." The word was sharp, definitive. "The baby is ours, Lila, not just yours. You don't want it." "I didn't say that." "You said—" "I said a lot of things in a lot of contexts that had nothing to do with the reality standing in front of me right now." Victor closed the distance between them in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching her. "You want to know what I said to Marcus? Fine. I said I never wanted children because in my world, they're targets. Because every rival I have would see a child as leverage. Because the thought of bringing someone innocent into this life, making them vulnerable to the violence and chaos that surrounds everything I do, it terrified me." Lila stared up at him, her breath catching. "But you know what terrifies me more," Victor continued, his voice dropping. "The thought of you out there, alone, carrying our child without me. The thought that you were so scared of my reaction that you'd rather disappear than tell me. The thought that I made you feel like you had to run." "I heard what you said," she whispered. "I know, and I can't take that back, but Lila, He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands. What I said was about fear, about trying to convince myself I could control every variable, eliminate every risk. But you can't control this. I can't control this. It's already real, already happening, and the only choice I have is how I respond. And how do you want to respond? His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, a gesture so tender it made her eyes sting. By being there, by protecting you both, by figuring out how to make this work. You don't have to, Lila said, even though the words felt like they were being torn from her chest. I'm not asking you for anything, Victor. I can do this alone. I will do this alone if I have to. I know you can. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. His hands slid down to her shoulders, his grip firm but gentle. But you shouldn't have to. And I don't want you to. Why not? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He stared at her for a moment, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. Because in the 2 years I've known you, you've been the only person who saw me as something other than what I am. Not a weapon, not a threat, just... He stopped, searching for words. Just myself. And when you left, when I realized you were gone and I didn't know where or why, or if you were safe, I understood something I'd been avoiding for months. What? That you're not a complication, Lila. You're the only thing in my life that feels real. The words broke something open inside her. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them, and Victor pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her with a desperation that matched her own. I'm sorry, he murmured into her hair. I'm so sorry you felt like you had to run, that you thought I wouldn't want this, want you. Lila pressed her face into his shirt, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. I was terrified. I know, and that's on me. But I'm asking you now, let me fix this. Let me prove that I'm not the man you heard in that office. Or if I am, let me prove I can be better. She pulled back enough to look up at him, her vision blurred with tears. How? However you need me to be. Whatever it takes. It was the kind of promise that should have felt empty, impossible. But coming from Victor Kane, a man who didn't make promises he couldn't keep, it felt like an anchor. I need time, she said. I need to know this isn't just about obligation or guilt. I need to know you actually want this. I want you, Victor said, his voice fierce. I want our child, and I want the chance to prove that to you every single day until you believe it. Lila closed her eyes, exhaustion and emotion washing over her in equal measure. I don't know if I can go back to New York, to that house, that life, pretending to be invisible while carrying your baby. You won't have to. We'll figure something else out, something better. He paused, then added quietly, but not tonight. Tonight you need rest, and food, and probably answers to about 1,000 questions running through your head. Despite everything, a small laugh escaped her. 1,000 might be conservative. Victor's expression softened, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Then let's start with one. Will you stay? Just for tonight. Let me take care of you, make sure you're okay, and tomorrow we can start figuring out the rest. It was such a simple request, and yet it felt monumental. Lila looked around the penthouse suite, spacious, luxurious, safe. Then she looked back at Victor, at the genuine concern in his eyes, the vulnerability he was allowing her to see. Okay, she said softly. I'll stay. The relief that washed over his face was almost painful to witness. Thank you, he said, and it sounded like a prayer. He guided her to the suite's bedroom, insisting she rest while he ordered food. Lila sank onto the bed, absurdly comfortable, probably thread counts she couldn't even comprehend, and for the first time in weeks felt the tension in her body start to unwind. Victor returned 20 minutes later with a tray of food, grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, fresh fruit, and ginger tea. The hotel's chef is apparently well-versed in pregnancy-friendly meals, he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. Rafe may have called ahead. Lila smiled despite herself. Of course he did. She ate slowly, Victor sitting in the armchair across from the bed, watching her with an intensity that should have felt uncomfortable but somehow didn't. Can I ask you something? She said between bites. Anything. The note I received this morning. The one that said you knew where I was and I should leave. Did you send that? Victor's expression darkened. No. What did it say exactly? She recited the brief message, watching his jaw tighten with each word. Someone's trying to scare you, he said. Make you run again. Did you recognize the handwriting? No, and there was no signature. Victor pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I'll have Rafe look into it. Check your building's security footage. See who delivered it. You think it's someone from your world? I think anyone who knows about you, about us, is either loyal to me or a threat. And threats don't send warning notes. He looked up from his phone, his gaze sharp. This feels personal, like someone who wants to protect you from me. Who would do that? That's what I intend to find out. They fell into silence, the only sound the quiet clink of silverware as Lila finished her meal. When she was done, Victor took the tray and returned with a glass of water. You should sleep, he said. It's been a long day. Lila glanced at the bed, then at him. Where will you sleep? The couch in the other room? I'm not going anywhere, Lila. You're safe here. She believed him, and that realization that she trusted Victor Kane, crime lord and dangerous man, to keep her safe should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. Victor, she called as he headed toward the door. He turned back. Yeah? Thank you for listening, for... She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything. For this. Something soft crossed his face. Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning. He left, closing the door quietly behind him, and Lila was alone with her thoughts. She lay in the darkness, one hand on her stomach, and for the first time since she'd heard Victor's words outside his office, she allowed herself to hope. Not for a fairy tale. Not for perfect. But for possible. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. She fell asleep with that fragile hope cradled close, unaware that in the suite's living room, Victor Kane sat in the darkness with his phone pressed to his ear, his voice cold as he issued orders that would shake his organization to its foundation. Because someone had threatened his family, and that was a mistake no one walked away from. The morning came too quickly. Lila woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee wafting from the other room. She found Victor in the suite's kitchen area, dressed in fresh clothes. He must have had Rafe bring them, and looking considerably more rested than he had the night before. Morning, he said, glancing up from his phone. How did you sleep? Better than I have in weeks, she admitted. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. Good. I ordered breakfast. Should be here in about 10 minutes. Lila poured herself a glass of orange juice and sat at the small dining table watching him. In this setting, casual, domestic, making coffee and checking his phone like any normal person, it was easy to forget who and what he was. Did you sleep at all? She asked. A few hours. I had some calls to make. About the note? Among other things. He set his phone down and joined her at the table. We need to talk about what happens next. Lila's stomach tightened, but she nodded. Okay. First thing, and this is non-negotiable, you're not going back to that Brooklyn apartment. It's compromised, and I won't risk your safety. Victor, I'm not trying to control you, he said quickly. I'm trying to protect you. Whoever sent that note knows where you live. That's a problem. He was right, and she knew it. So what do you suggest? I have a property about 2 hours north of the city, right on the Hudson. Private, secure, completely separate from my business operations. No one knows about it except me and Rafe. You could stay there, have space, privacy, safety. And you? I'd visit, as often as you'd let me. But it would be your space, Lila. Your home, not a cage. The distinction mattered. She could hear it in his voice, see it in his eyes. This wasn't about possession or control. It was about giving her what she needed while keeping her safe. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. Breakfast arrived, interrupting the conversation. They ate in companionable silence, and Lila found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't since before she'd left the mansion. There's something else, Victor said when they'd finished eating. Something I need to offer you, and I need you to understand I mean it without conditions or expectations. Lila set down her coffee. What is it? Victor pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. Legal documents. drawn up last night by Marcus. They establish a trust for you and the baby, full financial support, no matter what happens between us. Custody arrangements that give you complete authority unless you choose otherwise. Medical care, education, housing, everything covered. She stared at the folder, not touching it. Why? Because you need to know you have options, that you're not dependent on me, not trapped by circumstances. If you decide tomorrow that you want nothing to do with me, that you want to raise this child alone, you'll have everything you need to do that. And if I don't decide that? Victor's gaze held hers. Then we figure out how to do this together. But the choice is yours, Lila. It will always be yours. She opened the folder with shaking hands, scanning the dense legal language. Marcus had been thorough. The trust was substantial, the provisions comprehensive, the protections absolute. This is... She couldn't find the words. Victor, this is too much. It's not enough, he said quietly. But it's a start. Sign them or don't. Keep them as insurance or tear them up. I just need you to know they exist, that you have security regardless of what you choose. Lila looked up at him, this dangerous man offering her freedom, and felt something shift in her chest. Why are you doing this? Because I spent 3 weeks watching you from a distance, seeing you build a life without me, and it killed me. But what killed me more was knowing you felt like you had to, that you thought I'd trap you or hurt you or use this child as leverage. His voice roughened. I won't be that man, Lila. Not for you. Not for our baby. She closed the folder carefully. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Always. That conversation with Marcus, when you said you never wanted children, was it just about fear? About protecting hypothetical kids from your world, or was it deeper than that? Victor was quiet for a long moment, his expression distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured. My father was a violent man, cruel. He saw me as property, as an extension of his legacy, not as a person. When he died, I swore I'd never put another child through that, never perpetuate that cycle. But you're not your father. I'm exactly my father in the ways that matter. I built an empire on violence and fear. I make decisions that ruin lives. I'm not... He stopped, jaw tight. I'm not safe, Lila. Not in the ways a father should be. Do you want to be? The question seemed to shake him. What? Do you want to be safe? Do you want to be the kind of father you never had? More than anything, he said, the words raw and honest. But wanting it and being capable of it are different things. Lila reached across the table and took his hand, feeling the tension in his grip. Then that's where we start. Not with guarantees or promises neither of us can keep, just with the desire to try. Victor's fingers tightened around hers. And if I fail, then we figure it out together. That's what people do, Victor. They try, they fail, they keep trying. It's messy and imperfect, and sometimes it doesn't work. But it's real. He stared at their joined hands, something vulnerable and almost broken in his expression. I don't know how to do this. Any of this. Neither do I, but maybe that's okay. They sat like that for a while, hands clasped across the table, the Chicago skyline sprawling outside the windows. Two people who'd spent so long being something other than themselves, finally allowing the masks to slip. I want to see the house, Lila said eventually. The one on the Hudson. Victor looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Yeah? Yeah, and I want to understand what my life would look like there. What our lives would look like. We can go today, right now, if you want. She smiled. Let me shower and change first. Then we'll go. An hour later, they were in a car heading north, leaving Chicago behind. Rafe drove while Victor sat in the back with Lila, their hands intertwined on the seat between them. There's one more thing, Victor said as the city gave way to suburbs, then countryside. About going public. About us. Lila's stomach clenched. What about it? If we do this, if we're really doing this, I won't hide you. I won't hide our child. That means people in my world will know. They'll see you as connected to me, which makes you a target. I know. I need you to understand what that means. Enhanced security, restricted movements, a level of caution that might feel suffocating. as opposed to hiding in a Brooklyn apartment, terrified every time I hear footsteps in the hall. He conceded the point with a slight smile. Fair enough. I'm not naive, Victor. I know what your world is like. I spent 2 years in it, remember? You spent 2 years invisible in it. This would be different. You'd be visible, vulnerable. I'm already vulnerable. I'm pregnant and alone, and someone's already figured out enough to try scaring me away from you. She turned to face him fully. At least this way I'd have you. I'd have protection. I'd have a chance. Victor studied her face, and whatever he saw there made his expression soften. You're sure? I'm terrified, she admitted. But I'm sure. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Then we do this right. We protect you both, whatever it takes. The drive took 3 hours, the landscape gradually transforming from highway to winding roads to a private drive that climbed through dense forest. When they finally pulled up to the house, Lila's breath caught. It was beautiful. Not the cold grandeur of the Manhattan mansion, but warm and inviting, stone and wood and windows that overlooked the Hudson River. Surrounded by trees, isolated but not lonely, the kind of place where you could breathe. Victor, she whispered. It's perfect. He smiled, genuine relief crossing his face. Come see the inside. The interior was just as stunning. Hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, a kitchen that managed to be both modern and cozy. Upstairs, there were 4 bedrooms, including a master suite with a balcony that offered sweeping views of the river. This room, Victor said, opening a door to a smaller bedroom filled with afternoon light, could be a nursery if you wanted. Lila stepped inside, imagining a crib by the window, soft colors on the walls, a rocking chair in the corner. For the first time, the future felt tangible, real. I want this, she said, turning to him. I want to stay here, build a life here. With me? She crossed the room and took his hands, looking up into his eyes, this complicated, dangerous, desperately hopeful man. With you, if you're really ready to try. I'm ready, he said, and it sounded like a vow. He pulled her close, and she went willingly, letting herself be held, letting herself hope. Outside, the Hudson flowed steadily past, and inside this house that could become a home, 2 broken people began the slow, uncertain work of becoming whole. They spent 3 days at the house on the Hudson, 3 days that felt suspended outside of time and reality. Victor had Rafe arrange for clothes, supplies, everything Lila might need, and then he'd sent his security chief back to the city with instructions to handle business remotely, unless absolutely critical. You're neglecting your empire, Lila said on the second morning, watching Victor make breakfast in the kitchen. He'd rolled up his sleeves, flour somehow dusting his forearms as he attempted pancakes with varying degrees of success. My empire will survive a few days without me hovering over it, he said, flipping a pancake that landed perfectly in the pan. This is more important. Making breakfast, being here, with you, learning how to be something other than what I've always been. She smiled, settling onto one of the kitchen stools. How's that going? He looked down at the spatula in his hand, then back at her. Honestly, it's terrifying, but in a different way than I'm used to. Different how? The fear I'm used to is tactical, strategic. Someone's making a move, I counter it. There's a threat, I eliminate it. Action and reaction. He slid the pancake onto a plate and started pouring batter for another. This fear is about something I can't control, about being enough, about not failing you or this child in ways I won't even see coming. Lila's chest tightened. You know what I'm afraid of? Tell me. That you'll wake up one day and realize this was a mistake, that the reality of a crying baby and sleepless nights and the absolute chaos of parenthood will make you regret every promise you made in this kitchen. Victor set down the spatula and came around the counter, stopping directly in front of her. Look at me. She did, meeting his intense gaze. I have made a lot of promises in my life, he said quietly. Most of them were strategic, transactional, tools to get what I needed. But what I've said to you here, that's not strategy, Lila. That's the closest thing to truth I've spoken in years. People change their minds. Not about this. Not about you. He cupped her face gently. I know I can't make you believe that overnight. I know I have to prove it, but I will. Every single day, I will prove it. She leaned into his touch, letting herself absorb the certainty in his voice. Okay. Okay? Okay, I'll try to believe you, but Victor, you have to let me in. All the way in. No more secrets, no more protecting me from the reality of your world. If we're doing this, I need to know what I'm walking into. Something flickered across his face, hesitation, maybe resistance. But then he nodded. You're right. No more secrets. Starting now? Starting now. They ate breakfast together, and then Victor led her to the study, a smaller room off the main living area with built-in bookshelves and a desk that faced the windows. He pulled out his laptop, and for the next 2 hours gave her an education in exactly who Victor Kane was and what his organization did. He didn't sanitize it, didn't soften the edges. He showed her financial records, territory maps, the network of businesses, both legitimate and otherwise, that formed his empire. He explained the hierarchy, the key players, the rival organizations that would see her and their child as opportunities. Dominic Russo runs the operations in Brooklyn and Queens, Victor said, pulling up a photo of a man in his 50s with cold eyes. We have a truce, but it's fragile. He lost his son 2 years ago in a territory dispute with another family. He sees children as sacred. If he knew about our baby, he'd likely leave us alone. But his nephew, Marco, has ambitions and less sentiment. So Marco is a threat. Marco is ambitious, which makes him unpredictable. He's second in line to take over the Russo operation, but he's impatient. Victor clicked to another file. Then there's the Volkov organization, Russian, ruthless. They've been trying to expand into Manhattan for years. So far, I've kept them contained, but they're always looking for leverage. Well, Lila studied the faces on the screen, men who looked like they smiled at funerals and calculated odds at weddings. How many people want you dead? Victor's laugh was dark. On any given day? Dozens. But wanting me dead and being capable of making it happen are different things. And if they can't get to you? They try for the people I care about, which is why I've been very careful not to show that I care about anyone. He closed the laptop and turned to her. Until now. So going public with this, with us, puts a target on my back. A bigger one than you'd have just from being pregnant and alone, yes. But it also means you'd have protection, resources, people whose job is specifically to keep you safe. Like Rafe. Rafe and others. I'd build a security detail specifically for you, people I trust completely. People who understand that your safety is more important than any business deal or territory dispute. Lila absorbed this, trying to wrap her mind around a life where armed guards were as normal as morning coffee. What about the baby, when it's born? 24-hour protection, secure locations, background checks on everyone who comes within 10 feet of our child. Victor's voice hardened. I won't take chances, Layla. Not with this. That sounds like a prison. It sounds like survival in my world, but it doesn't have to be a cage. We'd still have this house, this space. We'd still have privacy, moments like these. We just have it within parameters that keep you both alive. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the river. I don't know if I can live like that, always looking over my shoulder, never knowing if the person at the grocery store is just shopping or surveillance from a rival family. Victor came up behind her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his presence. Then we find a middle ground. We make this as normal as possible while being realistic about the risks. And if it becomes too much, if you decide you can't do it, we'll find another solution. What kind of solution? Relocation. New identities. I'd make sure you and the baby disappeared so completely that even I couldn't find you. Lila turned to face him, shocked. You'd let us go? Completely? If it meant you were safe and happy? Yes. His expression was utterly serious. I told you, Lila, the choice is yours. Always. She searched his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the hidden agenda. But all she saw was sincerity, raw and almost painful in its honesty. I don't want to disappear, she said quietly. I just want to live. Really live. Not just survive. Then we'll figure out how to make that happen. They spent the rest of the day in careful conversation, mapping out possibilities. Victor made calls, his voice shifting into the cold authority she remembered from the mansion as he issued orders and made arrangements. Lila listened, learning the rhythm of his world, the way he balanced violence and strategy with the ease of someone conducting an orchestra. On the third night, as they sat on the back porch watching the sunset paint the river in shades of orange and gold, Victor's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. "I need to take this," he said, standing. "It's Marcus." He walked far enough away that Lila couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see his body language shift, tension creeping into his shoulders, his free hand clenching and unclenching. Whatever Marcus was saying, it wasn't good. When he returned, his face was carefully blank. "We need to go back to the city." "What happened?" "Someone made a move on one of my shipments, broad daylight, coordinated attack. No one was killed, but the message was clear." "What message?" "That I'm distracted. That there's a window of vulnerability." His jaw tightened. "I need to handle this personally. Show strength. Remind people why they don't fuck with my organization." Lila's stomach dropped. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow morning. Rafe's already arranging transport." He reached for her hand. "I'm sorry. I know we said 3 days, but this can't wait." "I understand." And she did, even though part of her wanted to beg him to stay, to forget about his empire and just be here with her in this perfect bubble they'd created. But that wasn't reality. Reality was Victor Kane, crime lord, whose world demanded his attention and his violence in equal measure. They packed in silence that evening, the easy intimacy of the past few days replaced by something heavier. Lila could feel Victor retreating, his mind already shifting to strategy and tactics, to the part of himself that made men kneel and rivals disappear. "Victor?" she said as they prepared for bed. "Yeah? Don't lose yourself. In whatever you have to do tomorrow, don't become someone I won't recognize." He crossed the room and pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with fierce tenderness. "I'll come back to you, I promise. Whole. As whole as I can be." It would have to be enough. They left at dawn, Rafe driving them back to the city in tense silence. Victor spent the entire trip on his phone, his voice clipped and cold as he coordinated responses and issued ultimatums. Lila watched the countryside give way to suburbs, then to the familiar chaos of Manhattan, and felt something precious slipping away. The car pulled up to a building in Tribeca, modern, expensive, the kind of place where wealthy people lived anonymous lives. "This is yours," Victor said as Rafe opened her door. "Top floor. Fully furnished, completely secure. Rafe's team has done a full sweep. You'll have 2 guards in the lobby at all times, more if needed." Lila looked up at the building, then back at him. "You're not staying." "I can't. Not tonight. I need to handle this situation before it escalates." He touched her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek. "But I'll be back. Tomorrow, the next day at the latest. And if something happens, if this escalates anyway, then you stay here, stay safe, and let me handle it." He pressed a keycard into her hand. "Penthouse. The elevator requires this to access your floor. Don't open the door for anyone except Rafe or me." Fear spiked through her. "Victor, what aren't you telling me?" He hesitated, and she saw the war in his eyes, the desire to protect her from the truth versus the promise he'd made about no more secrets. "The attack on my shipment," he said finally. "It wasn't random. Someone knew exactly when and where to hit us, which means either I have a leak in my organization or someone's been watching very closely. Someone like whoever sent me that note. Maybe. Rafe's still tracking that down." He glanced at his watch, impatience flickering across his face. "I need to go, Lila. But I'll call you tonight. And if anything feels wrong, if you sense any kind of threat, you call me immediately. Understand?" "I understand." He kissed her then, hard and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with something that looked like fear. "Stay safe," he said. "Both of you." Then he was gone, sliding back into the car, Rafe closing the door behind him. Lila watched the vehicle disappear into traffic, her hand instinctively covering her stomach. The apartment was beautiful, all glass and steel and carefully curated luxury. But it felt empty, cold, nothing like the warmth of the house on the Hudson. Lila explored the space mechanically, noting the well-stocked kitchen, the comfortable bedroom, the security system that probably cost more than most people's cars. Then she sat on the pristine white couch and tried not to feel like she'd made a terrible mistake. Her phone rang an hour later. Maya's name flashed on the screen. "Where the hell have you been?" Maya demanded the second Lila answered. "I've been calling your other number for days. I was about to file a missing persons report." "I'm sorry, I should have called. Things got complicated." "Complicated how? Lila, what's going on?" She wanted to explain, wanted to tell Maya everything about Victor, about the baby, about the impossible situation she'd walked back into, but the words stuck in her throat. "I can't really talk about it right now," she said instead. "But I'm okay. I promise." "You don't sound okay. You sound scared." "I'm just tired. It's been a long few days." Maya was silent for a moment. "This is about him, isn't it? The dangerous guy." "Maya, you went back to him. After everything, after running, you went back. It's not that simple." "It never is." Maya's voice softened slightly. "Just tell me you know what you're doing. Tell me you're not in over your head." Lila looked around the expensive apartment, thought about the guards in the lobby and the crime lord who'd promised to prove himself and the baby growing inside her. "I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm trying to figure it out." "Do you love him?" The question caught her off guard. Did she love Victor Kane? She'd been so focused on survival, on making impossible decisions and navigating dangerous waters, that she hadn't stopped to examine her feelings beyond fear and hope and desperate attraction. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I think I could. If he lets me." "That's the most terrifying thing you've ever said to me." "I know." They talked for a few more minutes before Maya had to go, but the conversation left Lila feeling unsettled. She spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking the few things she'd brought from the Hudson house, trying to make the apartment feel like something other than a luxurious holding cell. Victor called it 7, his voice tense. "How's the apartment?" "It's fine. Very nice. But not home. Not yet." She heard him exhale. "I'm sorry about this. About leaving you there alone while I deal with this mess." "What's happening? Can you tell me?" "We found the leak. One of my warehouse managers has been feeding information to the Volkovs. He's been dealt with." Lila didn't ask what "dealt with" meant. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. "And the Volkovs?" "I'm meeting with their leadership tomorrow, making it clear that further interference won't be tolerated." "Is that dangerous?" "Every meeting in my world is dangerous, but I'll have Rafe and a security team. It'll be fine." He didn't sound convinced, and that scared her more than anything. "Victor, if something happens to you, nothing's going to happen. I've been doing this for 20 years, Lila. I know how to handle territorial disputes. You didn't have a pregnant girlfriend to worry about 20 years ago." The word hung between them, girlfriend, casual, and inadequate for what they were to each other, but the closest label either of them had used. "No," Victor said quietly. "I didn't. Which is why I'm being extra careful. Why I'm taking every precaution. Because I have something to come back to now." Tears pricked at her eyes. "Promise me you'll come back." "I promise. Tomorrow night, I'll be at your door with takeout and terrible jokes and proof that the most dangerous thing in my life right now is how much I'm falling for you." She laughed despite herself, the sound watery. "That was a terrible joke already." "Then I'm ahead of schedule." His voice warmed. "Get some rest. Dream about the house on the Hudson and nurseries with river views. I'll see you soon. Be safe. Always." He hung up, and Lila was alone again with her thoughts and her fears and the growing certainty that she was in deeper than she'd ever intended to be. She fell asleep on the couch, exhausted by emotion and the constant low-level anxiety that had become her default state. Her dreams were fractured, Victor smiling in the kitchen, blood on expensive suits, a baby crying in an empty house while shadows moved in the hallway. She woke to her phone ringing, the apartment dark around her. The caller ID said Rafe. Her heart stopped. "Hello?" Her voice was rough with sleep and instant terror. "Lila, it's Rafe. Are you somewhere you can talk privately?" "I'm alone in the apartment. What happened? Is Victor—" "Victor's fine. He's alive, but there's been an incident." The relief was so intense she felt dizzy. "What kind of incident?" "The meeting with the Volkovs went wrong. Shots were fired. Victor's unhurt, but 2 of the Volkovs are dead, and the situation is escalating rapidly." "Where is he?" Secure location. He wanted me to call you. Let you know he's okay before you saw something on the news. The news? Lila's voice rose. This is going to be on the news. Probably. Shootout in a public restaurant tends to make headlines, even when we clean it up quickly. Rafe paused. He wants you to stay in the apartment. Don't go out, don't open the door for anyone. The Volkovs might retaliate, and you're an obvious target if they've been watching him. The fear that had been simmering all day exploded into full panic. Rafe, I can't just sit here waiting to be attacked. You won't be. I'm sending additional security to your building. They'll be positioned throughout the lobby and on your floor. No one gets to you without going through them first. And if they do get through? They won't. His voice was absolute. I've protected Victor for 8 years through wars and territory disputes and assassination attempts. I know how to keep people safe, Lila. You and that baby are at the top of my list right now. She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. When will I see Victor? He said he'd call you himself within the hour. He just needed to handle some immediate fallout first. After Rafe hung up, Lila paced the apartment like a caged animal. She turned on the television, flipping through news channels until she found it. Breaking news about a shooting at an upscale restaurant in Manhattan. The details were sparse, the footage showing police cars in yellow tape, but no mention of names or casualties beyond several people involved. Her phone rang again. Victor's number. I'm okay, he said immediately, before she could speak. I'm safe. I'm sorry you had to hear about this from Rafe instead of me. What happened? Exactly what I was trying to avoid. The Volkovs came to the meeting ready for war instead of negotiation. Someone pulled a gun, my team responded, and it turned into a bloodbath. Did you? She couldn't finish the question. Kill someone? No. My security did what they had to do to get me out alive. But the Volkovs lost 2 men, which means this isn't over. What does that mean for us? Victor was quiet for a long moment. It means things are going to get worse before they get better. It means I need to end this quickly and decisively. And it means you need to stay exactly where you are until I've neutralized the threat. How long? I don't know. Days, maybe. Possibly longer. Victor, I can't live like this. Locked in an apartment, terrified every time the phone rings. I know, and I'm sorry. But right now, your safety is the only thing that matters. Once I've handled the Volkovs, once I've secured our position, then we can talk about next steps. What if you can't handle them? What if this escalates into full-scale war? Then I'll do what I've always done. I'll win. His voice hardened. I've built this empire from nothing, Lila. I've survived challenges that would have destroyed lesser men. I'm not going to lose everything now because the Volkovs decided to make a play for my territory. She heard the shift in his voice, the crime lord emerging, the man who commanded fear and respect in equal measure. And for the first time, she truly understood the duality of who he was. Victor, the man who made her pancakes and promised to be better. Victor, the crime lord who would burn down the world to protect what was his. I'm scared, she whispered. His voice gentled immediately. I know, baby. I'm scared too, but we're going to get through this. I promise you, we're going to get through this. Don't make promises you can't keep. I've never broken a promise to you. I'm not starting now. They talked for another 20 minutes, Victor's voice grounding her even as he explained the steps he was taking to end the conflict. When they finally hung up, Lila felt marginally better. Not safe, but not quite as terrified. She spent the next 3 days in the apartment, watching the news obsessively and jumping at every sound. The story of the restaurant shooting faded from the headlines, replaced by other tragedies and scandals. But Lila knew that just because the media had moved on didn't mean the danger had passed. Rafe called daily with updates, terse reports on security measures, Victor's movements, the status of the Volkov situation. But Victor himself only called once more, a brief conversation where he sounded exhausted and distracted. I'm working on something, he said when she asked about his plans. A solution that doesn't involve more violence. But it's delicate, and I need you to trust me. I do trust you. Even when I can't tell you everything? She thought about his promise of no more secrets, about the reality that sometimes protection meant calculated silence. Even then, just come back to me. Soon, I promise. On the 4th day, Maya showed up at her door. Lila opened it to find her friend standing in the hallway, looking furious and determined in equal measure. How did you get up here? Lila demanded, glancing past Maya at the elevator that was supposed to require a key card. I told the very serious men in your lobby that I was your sister, and if they didn't let me up to see you, I'd call every news outlet in the city and tell them exactly whose apartment this was and why you were being held here. Despite everything, Lila almost laughed. They let you up? One of them called someone, probably your scary boyfriend, and got approval. Can I come in, or are we having this conversation in the hallway? Lila stepped aside, and Maya swept into the apartment, her sharp gaze taking in everything. Nice place, Maya said. Very crime lord's mistress chic. I'm not his mistress. No, you're his pregnant girlfriend hiding from a Russian mob family while he sorts out who gets to control Manhattan's underworld. So much better. Lila sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. How did you know all that? I'm not an idiot, Lila. I've been putting pieces together since you first ran, and then I saw the news about the shooting and started digging. Maya sat beside her. Why didn't you tell me who he was? Because I was ashamed, terrified. Take your pick. Victor Kane, Maya shook her head. You're having a baby with Victor Kane. Apparently. Are you insane? Probably. Maya studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Okay, tell me everything. And I mean everything. So Lila did. She told Maya about working at the mansion, about falling for Victor, about the pregnancy and running and being found. She told her about the house on the Hudson and the promises and the documents that gave her freedom even as she chose to stay. She told her about the fear and the hope and the impossible dream that maybe, somehow, this could work. When she finished, Maya was quiet for a long time. He really loves you, she said finally. Doesn't he? I think so. Maybe. I don't know if men like Victor Kane are capable of love in any normal sense. Love isn't normal, Lila. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes it makes absolutely no sense. But it's real. Maya reached over and squeezed her hand. The question is, do you love him? And there it was again, the question she'd been avoiding. Lila thought about Victor's hands gentle on her face, his voice rough with vulnerability, his absolute determination to protect her and their child. She thought about mornings in the kitchen and secrets shared in the darkness, and the way he looked at her like she was the only real thing in his entire world. Yes, she whispered. I think I do. Then you fight for it. You fight for him, and for that baby, and for whatever future you're trying to build together. Maya's voice was fierce. But you don't do it alone. You let me help. You let the people who care about you be part of this. Tears spilled down Lila's cheeks. I don't want you getting hurt because of me. Too late. I'm already involved. And I'm not going anywhere. They sat together on the couch, hands clasped, and for the first time in days, Lila didn't feel quite so alone. The breakthrough came on the 5th day. Victor called at noon, his voice different, lighter, almost jubilant. It's over, he said. The Volkov situation, it's done. What happened? I made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Territory adjustments, financial compensation, and a guarantee that further aggression would result in federal investigations into their legitimate businesses. They agreed to a ceasefire. Relief flooded through her. So we're safe? As safe as we can be in this world. There are always threats, always challenges. But the immediate danger has passed. When can I see you? Tonight. I'm coming to you tonight, and Lila, he paused. I have something to ask you, something important. Her heart stuttered. What is it? Not over the phone, in person. Just be ready at 7. He hung up before she could press for details, leaving her staring at her phone with a mixture of excitement and terror. Maya, who'd stayed the night and showed no signs of leaving, raised an eyebrow. What was that about? I think Victor's about to do something dramatic. Men like him are always dramatic. The question is whether it's good dramatic or disaster dramatic. Lila thought about the past weeks, about everything Victor had done and promised and sacrificed. I guess we'll find out tonight. Maya left at 6, after helping Lila pick out something to wear and offering approximately 50 theories about what Victor might be planning. He's either going to propose or tell you he's leaving the country, Maya said, applying mascara to Lila's lashes with the precision of a surgeon. Those are really the only two options dramatic enough for Victor Kane. He's not leaving the country. He just negotiated a ceasefire. Then it's a proposal, which means you need to decide right now what you're going to say. Lila looked at herself in the mirror, soft gray dress that disguised her small bump, hair loose around her shoulders, makeup subtle but present. She looked like someone preparing for a significant moment, which only increased her anxiety. I don't even know if that's what this is, she protested. Maya gave her a look. Crime lords don't do casual dinner announcements, Lila. Whatever he's planning, it's big. So figure out your answer before he gets here, because trust me, you don't want to be caught speechless when a man like that asks you a life-changing question. After Maya left, Lila paced the apartment, her mind racing. Would she marry Victor Kane? Could she marry him? The man was a crime lord, someone who operated outside the law and made his fortune through means she'd never fully understand. But he was also the man who'd promised to be better, who'd given her freedom even as she chose to stay, who looked at her like she was worth protecting at any cost. The knock came at exactly 7 o'clock. Lila opened the door to find Victor standing in the hallway, dressed in a dark suit that probably cost more than her first car. But it was his face that stopped her. The vulnerability there, the nervousness that seemed completely at odds with the powerful man she knew him to be. "Hi," he said. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with something electric and terrifying. Then Victor smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Can I come in, or are we doing this in the hallway?" She stepped aside and he entered carrying a bag from what she recognized as one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. He set it on the kitchen counter and turned to face her. "You look beautiful," he said. "You look nervous." "I am nervous. Absolutely terrified, actually." That admission from Victor Kane, who faced down rival crime families without flinching, made her heart skip. "Should I be worried?" "That depends on how you feel about dramatic gestures and potentially terrible ideas." Before she could respond, he crossed to her and took both her hands in his. The contact was warm, grounding, and she could feel the slight tremor in his fingers. "These past weeks have been the longest of my life," he said. "Every moment you were gone, every second I couldn't see you or talk to you or know if you were safe, it nearly destroyed me. And then when I found you, when I realized you'd been carrying our child alone because you thought I didn't want you," his voice cracked slightly and Lila squeezed his hands. "I made a lot of mistakes," he continued. "I said things I didn't mean, built walls I didn't need, convinced myself that keeping distance was the same as staying safe. But you've shown me something I didn't think was possible." "What's that?" "That I can be more than what I've always been. That I don't have to choose between the world I built and the life I want. That maybe, just maybe, I can have both if I'm willing to fight for it." Lila's throat tightened. "Victor?" "I'm not finished." He released one of her hands to reach into his jacket pocket, and her heart stopped as he pulled out a small velvet box. "I know this is fast. I know we're still figuring out what we are to each other. I know I'm a terrible risk and you'd be insane to tie yourself to me legally and permanently. But Lila..." He opened the box, revealing a ring that took her breath away. Not ostentatious, not the massive diamond she might have expected. Instead, it was elegant and understated, a platinum band with a single perfect sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds. "I don't want to hide you," Victor said quietly. "I don't want to keep you as some secret I protect from the shadows. I want everyone to know that you're mine and I'm yours. I want our child to have parents who are committed to each other, who chose each other, who are building something real together." Tears blurred her vision. "You're proposing. I'm asking you to marry me, to be my wife, my partner, the person I come home to when the world gets too heavy. I'm asking you to believe that I can be the man you deserve, even when I'm terrified I'll fail. I'm asking you to take the biggest risk of your life on someone who has absolutely no idea what he's doing but is willing to learn." She stared at the ring, at his face, at the impossible choice laid out before her. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane. They'd known each other 2 years but been together only weeks. He was a crime lord. She was pregnant, and the foundation of their relationship was built on secrets and fear and desperate choices. But the irrational part, the part that had kept his old t-shirt hidden in her duffel bag, that had dreamed about him in the darkness of her Brooklyn apartment, that had chosen to come to Chicago instead of running again. That part knew something the rational mind couldn't accept. This was right. Terrifying and impossible and completely right. "I have conditions," she said, her voice shaking. Hope flickered in Victor's eyes. "Name them." "First, I need you to promise that you'll keep trying to be better. Not perfect, not some impossible standard, just better than you were yesterday." "I promise." "Second, I need you to swear that our child will never be used as a pawn in your world. Not for business, not for alliances, not for anything. They get to be a child, Victor. A normal, protected, loved child. I swear it." "The third," she took a shaky breath. "Third, I need you to know that I'm terrified, that I have no idea if this will work, that I might wake up tomorrow or next week or next year and realize I made a terrible mistake." "I'm terrified too," he said, "every single day. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." "That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Is that a yes?" Lila looked at him, this complicated, dangerous, desperately hopeful man, and made a choice that felt like jumping off a cliff and growing wings simultaneously. "Yes, I'll marry you." The joy that transformed Victor's face was almost painful to witness. He pulled the ring from the box with shaking hands and slid it onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Because of course it did. Because he probably had Rafe researching her ring size weeks ago. Then he was kissing her and she was kissing him back, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this. His hands gentle on her face, her arms around his neck, the absolute certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I should have said it sooner, should have made it clear. But I love you, Lila, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone." "I love you too," she whispered. "Even though you're impossible and terrifying and completely insane." He laughed, the sound raw and genuine. "Those are some of my best qualities." They ate dinner on the couch, the expensive food barely registering as they talked about everything and nothing. Victor told her about the negotiation with the Volkovs, the compromises he'd made to secure peace. Lila told him about Maya's visit, about the days spent watching the news and imagining worst-case scenarios. "I want to do this right," Victor said as they finished eating. "A real wedding, not some courthouse ceremony or secret arrangement. I want you in a dress that makes me forget how to breathe. I want our friends there, what few we have. I want it to be something beautiful, something you'll remember forever." "Victor Kane, are you a romantic?" "Apparently. You've turned me into all sorts of things I never thought I'd be." "Like a father?" He grew quiet, his hand moving to rest on her stomach. The bump was more visible now, impossible to hide beneath loose clothing. "Yeah, like a father. That one still terrifies me." "Me too, but we'll figure it out. Together." Together. They spent that night at the apartment, Victor holding her close as they lay in bed, his hand never leaving her stomach. Lila felt the baby move for the first time. Just a flutter, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. "Did you feel that?" she asked, guiding his hand to the right spot. Victor's expression shifted to wonder. "That's our baby. That's our baby." He kissed her then, slow and sweet and full of promise. And for the first time since she'd heard his voice through the office door months ago, Lila let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. The next morning brought reality crashing back. They were eating breakfast when Rafe called, his tone urgent. "We need to meet," he said. "All of us. There's been a development." Victor's expression hardened immediately. "What kind of development?" "Not over the phone. I'm sending a car. 20 minutes. He hung up before Victor could argue. "So much for peace," Lila said quietly. "This might not be about the Volkovs. Could be anything." But Victor's tone suggested he didn't believe that any more than she did. The car arrived exactly 20 minutes later. Rafe was waiting in the back, his expression grim. "What's going on?" Victor demanded as they pulled away from the building. "We found out who sent Lila the warning note," Rafe said, "and you're not going to like it." "Who?" "Marcus." The name hung in the air like a grenade. Victor stared at Rafe, his expression shifting from confusion to fury in the space of a heartbeat. Marcus, he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. My attorney. The man I've trusted for 15 years. You're telling me he's the one who tried to scare Lila away from me? It gets worse, Rafe said. We traced his communications. He's been in contact with someone outside our organization. Someone who's been feeding him information about Lila's movements, her pregnancy, everything. Who? Rafe handed Victor a tablet, and Lila watched the color drain from his face as he read whatever was displayed there. It can't be, Victor said. It is. We verified it 3 times. Victor looked at Lila, and she saw something she'd never seen before in his eyes. Genuine shock. It's my sister. The words didn't make sense. You have a sister? Had. I thought I had a sister. She disappeared 8 years ago after we had a falling out about the family business. I assumed she wanted nothing to do with me or my world. I never... He stopped, running a hand through his hair. She's been watching. This whole time she's been watching. Why would she try to scare me away? Lila asked. Because she's trying to protect you, Rafe said. At least that's what her messages to Marcus suggest. She thinks Victor's world will destroy you and the baby. She wanted you gone before it was too late. Victor's jaw clenched. Where is she? We don't know yet, but Marcus does, and he's waiting at the office to talk to you. The drive to Victor's headquarters was tense and silent. Lila's mind raced, trying to process this new information. Victor had a sister who cared enough about Lila's safety to try intervening, even if her methods were questionable. They arrived at a nondescript office building in Midtown. Rafe led them to a private conference room where Marcus sat, looking older and more tired than Lila remembered. Victor, Marcus said, standing, I can explain. Sit down, Victor said, his voice cold enough to freeze, and start talking. Marcus sank back into his chair. Elena contacted me 6 months ago. She'd been following your activities, trying to stay connected to you from a distance. When she learned about Lila, about the pregnancy, she panicked. So she enlisted you to help scare Lila away. She was trying to protect her, to protect both of them from what she'd seen you become. Marcus looked at Lila. Elena lost someone she loved to this life. Your father's world destroyed her, Victor. She didn't want the same thing happening to Lila. That wasn't her choice to make, Victor said. It wasn't yours either. I know. And I'm sorry. But you need to understand, Elena loves you. She's been watching out for you all these years, even when you thought she was gone. She just wanted to save Lila from making a mistake. Lila found her voice. Where is she now? Marcus hesitated, then pulled out his phone and made a call. She's here, in the building. She wanted to talk to you both. Explain in person. 5 minutes later, the conference room door opened and a woman walked in who looked like a female version of Victor. Same dark hair, same intense eyes, same air of controlled power. Hello, Victor, she said quietly. Victor stared at his sister, emotions flickering across his face too quickly to name. 8 years? You've been gone 8 years and this is how you choose to reappear? Elena's gaze shifted to Lila. I'm sorry for the note, for scaring you, but I had to try. I had to give you a chance to escape before it was too late. Too late for what? Lila asked. For you to build a life with him and then watch it fall apart when his enemies figure out how much you mean to him. For you to bring a child into a world where bodyguards and bulletproof cars are normal. For you to lose everything because you loved someone who lives in darkness. That's enough, Victor said, his voice sharp. You don't get to make these decisions for her. You don't get to play savior when you abandoned your own family 8 years ago. I left to save myself, Elena shot back, because staying in your world would have killed me, Victor. Just like it killed Dad. Just like it's killed everyone who gets too close to the Kane family business. I'm not Dad. No, you're worse. You're smarter, more ruthless, more successful, which means the target on your back is bigger, and anyone who loves you becomes collateral damage. Lila stood up, tired of being talked about like she wasn't in the room. I appreciate your concern. Really, I do. But I'm not some helpless victim who needs saving. I made my choice. I chose Victor, knowing exactly who and what he is. Elena studied her. You think you know, but you haven't seen the worst of it yet. You haven't watched someone you love make impossible choices or lived through the violence that comes with this territory. You're right, I haven't. But I'm willing to try. And if it doesn't work, if it becomes too much, I have options. Victor made sure of that. Options, Elena repeated, almost laughing. You think paperwork and money will protect you? You think legal documents mean anything in our world? They mean Victor trusts me enough to give me a way out if I need it, Lila said firmly. They mean he's willing to risk losing me to give me freedom. That's not the behavior of someone who's trying to trap me. Elena looked at her brother, something shifting in her expression. You really love her. Yes, Victor said. More than I've loved anything or anyone in my entire life. Which is why your interference wasn't just wrong. It was dangerous. You could have driven her away permanently. You could have cost me the only real thing I've ever had. I was trying to protect her. By terrifying her? By making her feel hunted? By undermining the trust we were trying to build? Victor's voice rose. You want to protect her, Elena? Then help us. Use whatever resources you have, whatever knowledge you've gained in 8 years of watching from the shadows, and help me keep her safe. The request seemed to catch Elena off guard. You want my help? I want my sister back. I want the person who used to believe in me before this life hardened both of us. I want you to meet the woman I'm going to marry and the child she's carrying and understand that they're worth protecting, not sabotaging. Elena was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving between Victor and Lila. Finally, she sighed. Okay, I'll help. But I'm doing this for her, not for you. I don't care why you do it, as long as you do it. The tension in the room didn't exactly dissipate, but it shifted, from hostile to cautiously cooperative. Marcus excused himself, leaving the three of them alone. Tell me about the person you lost, Lila said to Elena. The one who made you leave this world. Elena's expression softened with old pain. His name was Daniel. He was a federal prosecutor who didn't know about my family connections when we met. When he found out, he tried to distance himself, but it was too late. Someone used him to get to our father, and Daniel ended up dead because he knew my last name. I'm sorry, Lila said sincerely. It was a long time ago, but it taught me something. This life destroys innocence. It destroys the people who love us because they become weapons used against us. So you ran. I survived. There's a difference. Elena looked at Victor. But I never stopped watching, never stopped caring what happened to you, even when I couldn't be part of your life. Victor's expression softened fractionally. You could have reached out, could have let me know you were alive and safe. I didn't think you'd want to hear from me, not after the things I said when I left. I would have always wanted to hear from you. You're my sister, Elena. That doesn't change just because you chose a different path. They talked for hours, rebuilding bridges that had been burned years ago. Elena told them about her life in the years since she'd left, how she'd built a quiet existence under a different name, working as a consultant for corporate security firms. She'd used her knowledge of the underworld to help legitimate businesses protect themselves from exactly the kind of threats Victor represented. So you've been working against me, Victor said, but there was no heat in it. I've been working to protect people from the world we grew up in. Sometimes that meant opposing you. Sometimes it meant quietly steering things in your favor when I thought you were in the right. That's why the Marconi family backed down 3 years ago, Rafe said, speaking for the first time in an hour. You fed them information that made them think Victor had federal protection. Elena smiled slightly. I may have implied certain connections that didn't exactly exist, but it worked. Victor shook his head, almost laughing. You've been my guardian angel this whole time. I've been your conscience. Someone had to be. As evening approached, Elena stood to leave. She paused at the door, looking at Lila. I meant what I said about helping. You're going to need someone who understands this world but isn't directly part of it. Someone who can give you perspective when things get complicated. I'd like that, Lila said. And maybe you could be part of the baby's life? They should know their aunt. Elena's eyes glistened. I'd like that too. After she left, Victor pulled Lila close, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. Well, that was unexpected. Your sister tried to save me from you, and now she's going to help us raise our baby. I'd say that's a pretty good outcome. You're taking this remarkably well. I'm too tired to panic anymore. Besides, I'm starting to realize that your family is just as complicated as mine was. At least yours is still alive to make amends. He kissed the top of her head. Let's go home. The apartment? The house on the Hudson. I want to wake up with you where we can actually breathe, where we can start planning the future instead of just surviving the present. They drove north as the sun set, the city giving way to countryside. Victor held her hand the entire way, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I've been thinking about the wedding, he said, as they neared the house. About what you might want. I want small, intimate, just the people who matter. So not a massive display of wealth and power? Definitely not. Just us, our friends, your sister if she'll come, something that feels real. Real, Victor repeated. I can do real. They spent the next 2 weeks at the house, planning and preparing and slowly building the life they'd promised each other. Elena visited twice, tentatively reconnecting with her brother and cautiously befriending Lila. Maya came up for a weekend bringing absurd quantities of baby supplies and decorating advice. You're really doing this, Maya said, as she helped Lila paint the nursery a soft gray blue, marrying a crime lord and having his baby. Apparently. Are you happy? Lila thought about it. Really thought about it. She thought about the fear that still woke her sometimes at 3 a.m., about the uncertainty that colored every plan they made. But she also thought about Victor's laugh when she beat him at cards, about the way he talked to her stomach when he thought she was sleeping, about the future they were building one careful choice at a time. Yeah, she said. I think I am. The wedding took place on a Saturday in late autumn, in the garden behind the house on the Hudson. There were 16 people total, Rafe and his wife, Marcus and his husband, Elena looking uncomfortable but present, Maya serving as maid of honor, and a handful of Victor's most trusted associates who'd been told this was a friendship commitment ceremony and asked no questions. Lila wore a simple cream dress that accommodated her growing belly, her mother's necklace at her throat. Victor wore a dark suit and looked at her like she was the only person in the world. The ceremony was brief. The vows they'd written themselves even briefer. But when Victor promised to protect her and their child, to be better than his past, to choose love over fear, Lila believed him. And when she promised to stand beside him, to see him as more than his worst choices, to build a life together even when it seemed impossible, she meant every word. They kissed as husband and wife while their small gathering applauded, and Lila felt something settle in her chest. Not perfect certainty, not the absence of fear, just quiet, fragile hope. They had dinner on the back porch as the sun set over the river, and Lila watched Victor laugh at something Rafe said and felt their baby kick in response to the sound. Maya caught her eye and smiled, and Elena raised her glass in a small, private toast. This was her family now, complicated and dangerous and absolutely real. Later, after everyone had left and they were alone in their bedroom, Victor pulled her close and whispered, "No regrets?" "Not yet. Ask me again in 20 years. I will. Every year for the rest of our lives I'll ask, and hopefully you'll keep saying no." She kissed him, tasting promise and hope and the future they were building together. Outside, the Hudson flowed steadily toward the sea, and inside this house that had become home, two people who'd found each other in darkness began to believe in light. The first real test came 3 months after the wedding, when Lila was 7 months pregnant and moving through the house with the careful waddle of someone carrying considerable weight in front of them. Victor had been in the city for 2 days handling business that couldn't be delegated, and she'd stayed at the Hudson house with a security detail that made her feel both protected and suffocated. She was reading in the library when her phone rang, not Victor's number, but one she didn't recognize. Against her better judgment, she answered, "Hello? Mrs. Kane." The voice was unfamiliar, male, with an accent she couldn't quite place. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Every instinct screamed danger. "Who is this?" "Someone who wishes to have a conversation with your husband, but he's been very difficult to reach lately, distracted perhaps by his new domestic situation." Lila's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. "If you want to talk to Victor, call his office. I'm afraid this requires a more personal touch. You see, your husband made certain promises during his negotiation with the Volkov family, promises he seems to have forgotten." Her blood ran cold. "The ceasefire." was conditional, and those conditions have not been met. So I'm calling as a courtesy, Mrs. Kane, to let you know that your husband has 24 hours to honor his commitments, or the consequences will be severe. What consequences? The kind that affect families, wives, unborn children. The threat was delivered almost pleasantly, which made it infinitely more terrifying. Tell him Dmitry Volkov called. He'll understand. The line went dead. Lila's hand shook as she immediately called Victor. He answered on the first ring. Is everything okay? Someone just called me, Dmitry Volkov. He said you broke promises from the ceasefire agreement and that I have 24 hours to tell you to fix it, or there will be consequences. The silence on the other end was deafening. When Victor spoke again, his voice was ice. What exactly did he say? She repeated the conversation word for word, her fear transmuting into anger. You told me the Volkov situation was resolved. You promised me we were safe. We were. We are. This is... She heard him exhale sharply. This is Dmitry trying to leverage you for something I already gave him. He's testing boundaries, seeing if threatening my family will make me more compliant. And will it? No, because giving into this would make you a permanent target. Every time someone wanted something from me, they'd threaten you or the baby. That's not a precedent I can set. So what are you going to do? End this, permanently. His voice hardened. I'm coming home. Don't answer any more calls from numbers you don't recognize. Don't open the door for anyone except Rafe or me, and keep security close. Victor, I will handle this, Lila. I promise you, this ends today. He hung up, and she was left staring at her phone, 7 months pregnant and terrified, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake by choosing this life. Rafe arrived within the hour, his expression grim. Victor called, told me what happened. Is he overreacting, or am I in actual danger? Both, probably. Dmitry's a problem, but he's also a coward. Threatening you is a power play, not an actual plan. But Victor's right. We can't let this stand. So what happens now? Now we wait for Victor to do what he does best. Victor arrived as the sun was setting, and Lila had never seen him look quite so dangerous. He walked into the house like a storm, his eyes cold and his movements precise. He kissed her once, hard and possessive, then turned to Rafe. Status? Dmitry's at his restaurant in Brighton Beach. 3 security personnel, minimal backup. He thinks he's untouchable. He's wrong. Victor looked at Lila. I need you to stay here. Elena's on her way. She'll stay with you until this is resolved. How are you planning to resolve it? With a conversation Dmitry won't forget. Victor, she grabbed his arm. Don't do anything that you can't come back from. Don't become someone I won't recognize just to prove a point. His expression softened fractionally. I'm not going there to kill him, Lila. I'm going there to make him understand that you and our child are off limits, that there are lines even in our world that don't get crossed. And if he doesn't listen, then I'll make sure everyone else does. He left with Rafe and 2 other security personnel, and Lila was alone with her fear and her growing certainty that she'd pushed Victor into a confrontation that could end catastrophically. Elena arrived 30 minutes later, looking unusually tense. Has he called? No, he's been gone 40 minutes. How long does a conversation take? It depends on the conversation. Elena settled onto the couch beside her. But knowing my brother, he's being thorough. That's what I'm afraid of. They waited in tense silence, the minutes crawling by with excruciating slowness. Lila tried to read, to watch television, to do anything that would distract from the scenarios playing in her mind. But every worst-case possibility seemed more vivid than the last. When Victor finally called, 2 hours had passed, and Lila had nearly worn a path in the hardwood floor from pacing. It's done, he said without preamble. Done how? Dmitry won't be bothering us again. Neither will anyone else who thinks threatening my family is a viable strategy. Victor, what did you do? I reminded him that I have resources he can't match and connections he can't counter. I showed him very detailed files on every member of his family, every business interest, every vulnerability in his organization. And then I explained that if anything happens to you or our child, anything at all, accident or otherwise, every single one of those vulnerabilities becomes a target. You threatened his family. I showed him that mutually assured destruction works both ways. He threatens mine, I threaten his, And since I'm significantly better at following through on threats than he is, he agreed to an expanded ceasefire that includes explicit protection for family members on both sides. Lila sank onto the couch, relief and residual fear warring in her chest. Is it really over? Yes. Dimitri's not stupid enough to push this further, and I've sent word through every channel I have that you're protected, that our child is protected, that anyone who even looks at either of you wrong will answer to me personally. So you've painted an even bigger target on yourself. Maybe, but I've also made it clear that the cost of coming after you is too high for anyone to pay. It's the best protection I can offer in this world, Lila. She closed her eyes, feeling the baby kick against her ribs. Come home. Already on my way. When he walked through the door an hour later, she searched his face for signs of the violence she knew he was capable of. But all she saw was exhaustion and relief and the same man who'd promised to be better. You didn't hurt him, she said. I didn't have to. Sometimes the threat is more effective than the action. He pulled her close, careful of her stomach. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Sorry my world keeps finding ways to touch you. It's our world now. For better or worse. Mostly worse lately. Then we're due for some better. The better came 2 months later, on a snowy January night when Lila's water broke at 3 a.m. Victor had been asleep beside her, his hand resting on her stomach like he'd done every night since they'd moved to the house. The moment she gasped and shook his shoulder, he was instantly awake, alert in the way only someone accustomed to danger could be. It's time, she managed. The baby's coming. She'd never seen Victor Kane panic before. It was almost comical. This man who faced down crime families and negotiated under gunfire was suddenly fumbling for his phone, trying to put on pants and shoes simultaneously, asking her questions he'd already asked 3 times. Hospital bag. Where's the hospital bag? Front closet. Victor, breathe. I'm breathing. You breathe. Should you be breathing differently? What did the class say about breathing? Despite the pain, she laughed. You're panicking. I'm not panicking. I'm efficiently preparing for a medical emergency. You're adorable. He stopped, looked at her, and something in his expression softened. I'm terrified. Me too. But we're doing this together, remember? He crossed to her and cupped her face in his hands. Together. The drive to the hospital was a blur of contractions, and Victor's attempts at soothing commentary that mostly involved him telling her medical facts he'd apparently memorized, and her telling him to please shut up and just hold her hand. Labor was long and difficult, and punctuated by moments of sheer terror when the baby's heart rate dropped, and doctors rushed in with urgent instructions. But through it all, Victor never left her side. He held her hand through contractions, wiped her forehead with cool cloths, murmured encouragement even when she was pretty sure she threatened to kill him at least twice. You're doing amazing, he said during one particularly brutal contraction. I hate you so much right now. I know, I love you too. And then, after 16 hours of labor, their daughter entered the world with a cry that made Lila's heart stop and restart simultaneously. The nurse placed the baby on her chest, and Lila looked down at this tiny, perfect person they'd created and felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of love. She's perfect, Victor whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Lila, she's perfect. She is. Tears streamed down Lila's face as she studied their daughter's face, Victor's dark hair, her own nose, and eyes that would probably take months to settle into their permanent color. What should we name her? They'd debated names for weeks, cycling through options and never quite settling. But looking at their daughter now, Victor said, Hope. Her name is Hope. Lila looked up at him, at this dangerous man who'd chosen that particular word, and smiled through her tears. Hope Elena Kane. Victor's expression crumbled, just for a moment. Elena? Your sister helped save us. It feels right. He kissed Lila then, soft and reverent, before turning his attention back to their daughter. Welcome to the world, Hopi Elena. We're going to try very hard not to mess this up. The baby yawned, utterly unconcerned with the weight of that promise. Elena arrived later that day, bringing Maya and Rafe with her. The sight of Victor's sister holding his daughter, tears streaming down her face, made Lila's chest ache with emotion. She's beautiful, Elena whispered. Thank you. For the name, for including me in this. Your family, Lila said simply. You've always been family. Maya held Hope next, cooing and making promises about all the inappropriate things she was going to teach her niece. Rafe stood at a respectful distance until Victor physically handed him the baby, at which point the stoic head of security looked utterly terrified. I've protected you for 8 years, Rafe said to Victor. But this is the scariest thing you've ever asked me to do. Welcome to fatherhood, Victor said, grinning. The terror is constant. They spent 3 days in the hospital, Victor refusing to leave despite the uncomfortable chair and his obvious exhaustion. He held Hope for hours, studied her face like he was memorizing every detail, and looked at Lila like she'd given him something he'd never dared to want. On their last night before going home, Lila woke at 2 a.m. to find Victor standing by the window with Hope in his arms, talking to her in a voice so soft Lila almost couldn't hear. Your mother is the bravest person I've ever met, he was saying. She chose to build a life with me even though she had every reason to run. She chose to believe I could be better even when I didn't believe it myself. And now we have you, and I'm going to spend every day of the rest of my life making sure that choice wasn't a mistake. He paused, adjusting his hold on the baby. I'm going to teach you to be strong, Hope, but not the kind of strength that comes from fear or violence. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and standing up for what matters. The kind your mother has. Lila's throat tightened with emotion. And I'm going to give you a different life than the one I had, Victor continued. You're going to know that you're loved, not for what you can do for the family business, but just for existing. You're going to have choices, opportunities, a future that isn't defined by the mistakes I've made. He looked down at Hope, and Lila could see his expression reflected in the window, awe and fear and overwhelming love. I don't know if I'm going to be any good at this, but I promise you, I'm going to try. Every single day, I'm going to try to be the father you deserve. Lila let him have the moment, pretending to sleep even as tears slipped down her cheeks. This was who Victor Kane really was, she realized. Not the crime lord or the dangerous man or the person everyone else feared. This was the man beneath all of that. Someone who'd been broken by his own father and was desperately determined not to perpetuate that cycle. They brought Hope home to the house on the Hudson on a gray February morning, the river frozen and the trees bare, but somehow still beautiful. Maya had decorated the nursery while they were gone, adding touches that made the space feel warm and lived in. The first month was chaos. Hope didn't sleep, which meant neither did they. Lila recovered from childbirth while trying to figure out breastfeeding, and Victor attempted to manage his organization remotely while functioning on 3 hours of sleep and constant worry. But there were moments of pure magic, too. Victor singing off-key lullabies at 3 a.m., Lila watching him change diapers with the same focused intensity he brought to business negotiations. The 4 of them, Victor, Lila, Hope, and usually Rafe hovering nearby, finding a rhythm that felt almost normal. The second test came when Hope was 2 months old. Victor had been spending more time in the city, his organization requiring attention he couldn't continue to provide from a distance. He'd been talking about transitioning certain operations, delegating more responsibility, finding ways to step back from the day-to-day violence that had defined his life for so long. I've been thinking, he said one night as they sat in the nursery, Hope asleep in Lila's arms, about what I want my legacy to be, what I want Hope to inherit. And what do you want it to be? Not this, not an empire built on fear and illegal operations. I want to give her something legitimate, something she can be proud of. Lila looked at him in surprise. You're talking about going legitimate? Not completely, not overnight, but gradually transitioning the organization into legal businesses. Real estate, investments, consulting. The infrastructure is already there. I've been using legitimate businesses to launder money for years. What if we flip that? Use the illegal profits to build something clean. That would take years, maybe decades. I have time, and I have motivation. He reached over and gently touched Hope's tiny hand. I don't want her growing up ashamed of who I am. I don't want her friends' parents pulling them away when they find out her last name. I want better for her. And what about the people who won't want you to go legitimate, the rivals who'll see it as weakness? That's where it gets complicated. Victor leaned back in his chair, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. I'd have to make it clear that I'm not stepping down because I'm weak, but because I'm choosing a different path. I'd have to maintain enough of the old organization to protect what I've built while gradually transitioning everything else. That sounds impossible. Probably. But so was getting you to marry me, and that worked out. She smiled despite the seriousness of the conversation. You're really serious about this. I've never been more serious about anything, except maybe you and Hope. He met her gaze. I can't undo 20 years of choices, Lila. I can't erase the things I've done or the people I've hurt. But maybe I can spend the next 20 years building something worth leaving behind. Then let's do it, together. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It took months of careful planning, strategic negotiations, and more than a few confrontations with people who didn't understand why Victor Kane would willingly reduce his criminal empire. Elena proved invaluable during the transition, using her corporate security contacts to help establish legitimate businesses and create distance between Victor's past and his future. Rafe took on more responsibility for the parts of the organization that couldn't be legitimized, creating a buffer that allowed Victor to step back without appearing weak. And through it all, Lila watched her husband slowly become someone new. Not completely different, he was still Victor Kane, still capable of cold calculation and strategic ruthlessness when necessary. But now those qualities were directed toward building rather than destroying, toward protecting rather than conquering. Hope's first birthday brought everyone back to the house on the Hudson. Maya helped organize a small party, and Lila watched with joy as their daughter smeared cake all over her face while Victor documented every moment with his phone. She's going to hate you when she's a teenager and you show these photos to her friends, Elena said, laughing. That's what parents are for, Victor replied, completely unbothered. Later, after everyone had left and Hope was asleep, Victor found Lila on the back porch, looking out at the river. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. How different everything is from a year ago. How scared I was, and how much has changed. Better or worse? She leaned back against him. So much better. Harder than I expected, messier than I imagined, but better. I love you, he said quietly. I don't say it enough, but I do. You changed everything, Lila. You gave me a reason to be better. You gave yourself that reason. I just believed you could do it. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight dance on the water. Inside, Hope slept peacefully in her nursery, surrounded by love and protection and the kind of stability Lila had once thought impossible. 3 years later, Lila stood in the same spot, her hand in Victor's, watching their daughter play in the yard with her cousin, Elena's son, born 2 years after Hope. The house had been added onto, expanded to accommodate the growing family and the life they were building. Victor had successfully transitioned most of his organization into legitimate businesses. He still had connections to his old world, still maintained the relationships and respect that kept them protected. But the daily violence had faded, replaced by board meetings and investment strategies and the kind of power that came from money rather than fear. I have something to tell you, Lila said, watching Hope chase after Elena's son with a stick she'd declared a magic wand. Victor looked at her, and she saw the instant concern in his eyes. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I'm pregnant. The transformation of his expression from worry to shock to pure joy was something she'd treasure forever. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing like she'd never heard him laugh before. Another baby, he said, setting her down but keeping his hands on her waist. We're having another baby. Are you happy? Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Terrified, yes. Overwhelmed, definitely, but happy most of all. He kissed her, soft and sweet. How far along? 2 months. I wanted to be sure before I told you. 2 months. He shook his head in wonder, then called out to Hope. Hope, come here, sweetheart. Mommy and I have news. Their daughter ran over, all wild dark hair and bright eyes, so much of both of them in her face. What is it? Victor knelt down to her level. How would you feel about being a big sister? Hope's eyes went wide. I'm getting a baby? In about 7 months, yes. She launched herself at both of them, squealing with delight, and Lila caught Victor's eye over their daughter's head. He smiled, and in that smile she saw everything they'd built, the trust, the love, the impossible future that had somehow become their present. Maya, visiting for the weekend, appeared on the porch with Elena. "Did I just hear what I think I heard?" "Lila's pregnant," Victor announced, unable to keep the grin off his face. "Well, it's about time," Maya said. "Hope needs someone to boss around." They celebrated that evening with a dinner that felt like family in the truest sense, loud and chaotic and full of laughter. Rafe stopped by with his wife and kids, and Marcus called to offer congratulations when Elena told him the news. As night fell and their guests departed, Lila found herself in the nursery that would soon belong to their second child. Victor joined her, pulling her back against his chest. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Terrified. But the good kind of terrified. The kind that means I have something worth protecting. Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life over the power you had before?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I miss the simplicity sometimes, the clarity of knowing exactly who I was and what I wanted. But this," he gestured around the nursery, toward the life they'd built. "This is better, harder, messier, infinitely more complicated, but better. Even on the days when hope refuses to nap, and I'm covered in spit-up, and you're late for another conference call because the world's slowest diaper change." He laughed. "Especially on those days. Because those days are real, Lila. They're messy and imperfect and absolutely real. And I spent so many years living in a world that was carefully controlled and strategically managed that I forgot what real felt like." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I love you. I love the life we've built. I love that our children will grow up in a house full of love instead of fear. I love you too. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone." He paused, then added, "And I love that we're going to do this again. The sleepless nights, the chaos, all of it. You say that now. Wait until we're dealing with 2 kids under 4. We'll survive. We always do." And they did survive. They thrived even. Their son was born that autumn, a calm baby who slept through the night almost immediately and earned the name James after Lila's father. The years that followed were full of the ordinary chaos of raising children, of birthday parties and skinned knees and the constant negotiation between work and family. Victor continued to transform his organization, establishing the Kane Foundation to help at-risk youth and investing in community programs that gave others the opportunities he'd never had. Elena became a permanent fixture in their lives, her own family intertwining with theirs in ways that healed old wounds and created new traditions. Maya remained Lila's closest friend, her sardonic commentary and unwavering support a constant through every challenge. On Hope's 10th birthday, Lila watched from the porch as Victor taught their daughter and James to skip stones on the river. Hope was growing into herself, fierce and independent, with her father's strategic mind and her mother's compassion. James, 7 now, idolized his big sister and followed her everywhere. "You did good," Elena said, joining Lila on the porch. "Both of you. You built something real here." "We did, didn't we?" Lila smiled, watching Victor laugh as Hope's stone skipped 5 times. "It wasn't what I expected, and it definitely wasn't easy, but it was worth it." "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd run that day? If you'd gotten on a bus to somewhere far away and never looked back?" Lila considered the question. "Sometimes, but I think I would have spent the rest of my life wondering what if, wondering if I'd made a mistake. At least this way, I know." "And was it? A mistake?" "No. It was the scariest, most impulsive, most complicated decision I've ever made. But it wasn't a mistake." She looked at her sister-in-law. "What about you? Any regrets about coming back into Victor's life?" Elena watched her son play with Hope and James, her expression soft. "None. I thought I had to leave to survive, and maybe I did at the time. But coming back, rebuilding that relationship, it gave me something I didn't know I was missing. Family, real, complicated, messy family." That evening, after the party ended and the children were finally asleep, Victor found Lila in their bedroom. He looked exhausted and happy in equal measure. 10 years old, he said, shaking his head. "How is Hope 10 years old already?" "Time moves faster when you're not constantly running from crime families." He laughed, pulling her close. "You know what I realized today?" "What?" "I've been with you longer than I've been without you, at least in the ways that matter. And every year, I keep thinking I can't possibly love you more than I already do. And every year I'm wrong." Lila's eyes stung with happy tears. "You're getting sentimental in your old age. I'm 47. That's not old. It is to our 10-year-old daughter." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. "Have I told you today that you're the best thing that ever happened to me?" "Not in the last hour." "Criminal oversight. Let me rectify that immediately." They fell into bed together, and Lila thought about the journey that had brought them here. From invisible housekeeper to crime lord's wife. From terrified and pregnant to mother of two. From running away to choosing to stay. It had been messy and imperfect and sometimes absolutely terrifying, but it had also been real and honest and built on a foundation of genuine love. She fell asleep in Victor's arms, listening to the river flow past outside their window, and dreamed of the future they were still building together, one careful choice at a time. Years later, when Hope brought her own family to visit the house on the Hudson, she'd walk through these rooms and see the photographs on the walls. Her parents' wedding in the garden. Victor holding her as a newborn, looking terrified and awed. Family dinners on the back porch, Christmases around the fireplace. Ordinary moments made extraordinary by the love that surrounded them. And she'd tell her children about how their grandparents had found each other against impossible odds, had chosen love over fear, had built a life together that proved redemption was possible even for people who'd made terrible mistakes. But that was still in the future. For now, in this moment, Lila Hart Kane slept peacefully beside her husband, their children safe in their rooms, the house they'd built together standing strong against whatever storms might come. She'd been invisible once, terrified and running. Now she was seen, chosen, loved beyond measure, and that made all the difference. The river flowed on, as it always had and always would, carrying their story forward into whatever came next, together as they'd promised, always together.